Today is the last class for this stewardship series, and well, that's good. Like, normally people are just boo because it's me, so thank you. But it was a 3 month course that Capitol Hill Baptist Church did in Washington, D.C., and so I have crammed 3 months into the past 5 weeks, and that's very challenging. If you all want more of a deep dive, you can go to Capitol Hill Baptist Church and look the series up. I will say that there's a lot of it. It is a inspiration for this class. It's certainly obviously not one for one because Washington, D.C. is very different than Frankfort, Kentucky. And then there's also a group of men that taught the class. And so even the tone of like translating it to a women's class, like there's just a lot of references that are different. But it is an interesting class to like go through and really do a deep dive. So if you all want to, by all means do that. So, does anyone want to share anything that maybe they feel they have either learned or that the Holy Spirit revealed over the past 5 weeks in this class? Fantastic. Well, I think we all do. Yeah. So, is there something that maybe was revealed or something that you may have felt like, oh, that one particular area spoke to me? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent point that it's like you can kind of become so focused on whatever that thing is that you're not like, oh, but there's still a purpose for me. Like I still have something to do. And when my sister was going through her whole cancer diagnosis and treatment and all of that stuff, it was like she was still Kim. And, it's like you didn't want to be that person that was just like, oh, there's the sick person or there's the person that has that thing. And, it's like that was really important to Kim to be like, I still have a purpose in this. And she had said, um, she said, this is something that God gave to me and I want to do it well. And so you are stewarding whatever that diagnosis is well. And I won't reveal too much about it, but there was just some crazy circumstances that led Allison and I together on one Sunday years ago. And had those series of circumstances not happened, then we wouldn't have ended up having a beautiful friendship that came from that. So it kind of was something that came from a really hard place that, we had never met each other. And then all of a sudden we're like, never in the car. And it was like the weirdest series of events. And so there are really odd circumstances that can bring you together in other people's lives that are very hard and awkward. And you could just be like, there's a purpose in this. And so that was just one of like the sweet things that you said, even serving other people or being served. So I appreciate that. So did anyone else have anything? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's also um, I think a pride that can go into the I'm so busy. that, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. Let me show everyone how busy I am. I've got this to do. I've got that to do. And so if you're not stopping in those moments and really going, oh, wait, why am I busy? But why am I, you know, pretty excited to share with other people how busy I am. So I agree with you, Wendy. That's a great one. The distractions that can come in and you have to really evaluate, but why am I busy? So anybody else have? So you all know that I'm going to ask this because, I asked it last time. So did anyone do the fiscal fast even for a day? No? Okay. Did anyone do the time audit? Okay. So out of the people that did the time, I have extra copies of the time audit if you all do want one, but out of the people that did it, um, what did it reveal? Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, because you're. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're a very transparent, busy mom, and I think that it gives all of us a peek into some circumstances that might be unique to your life, but also we could transfer those to just any unique thing in our own lives where you may find yourself at a swim meet, or you might find yourself at the climbing gym, or at a basketball game. Right. Right. So intentionality. Like you're saying, there's purpose in these minutes. Even if it's 5 minutes that I have before the swim meet starts, I do have those 5 minutes, but I have to be intentionally focused. And I think sometimes, like when you're doing something like that time audit, like if you're not really evaluating it, like you may not have had that revealed. You just may have been like, I just don't have time. I'm just busy. Yeah. Yeah. No, great share. Thank you so much. Did anybody else have anything? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Right. Yeah. Well, and I do think it's going to look different for each of us in different seasons. Like Lisa even shared to me that, you know, uh, Lisa retired and is now busier than she's ever been. And I think that happens to a lot of people when they retire because now all of a sudden you are able to invest in so many lives in so many ways that you wished you may have been able to before, but you just can't because you're like in a circumstance of going to 4 different like sporting things or whatever it is. So it is going to look different for different seasons. So I appreciate what you're saying, but something that if um, there was a series that was done a bit ago, like a Hey Neighbor series, actually a year ago, and you decided that you were going to plow up your whole yard and plant flowers, and the conversations that happened with neighbors because she made this decision that she's like, I'm going to plow up my yard, and that looks insane to people because people are like, oh, you have to have grass. Well, why do you have to have grass? Like, what? Why? Why does every single person have to have grass? Why can't it be right? And so, the conversations that came from that. So, right. Well, I would ask, like, if you were out there, I'd be like, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Yeah, it does. It opens those up so you find those conversations and the things that you may say, like using like that time audit or, going, oh, I don't have a social life. You can say, well, I do. It just isn't like going to the club, or whatever, I don't know. Do people go to clubs anymore? I don't know. I don't know. Yep. Hmm. Right. 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 Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's like you just kind of have to like roll it all in to like whatever your daily rhythms are. You're just kind of rolling it all in. Right. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I mean the thing is like you could even bring up things like if you're saying, "Oh, I haven't done the physical fast for even a day." You could bring that up with your friend and say, "Okay, we were in class. This was something that was brought up. Why don't we do this crazy idea? Let's just, and you can start having like those conversations or, bring up like the time audit and say, oh, I did this. I realized I had more chunks of time or I could better use the time that I have and steward it well. So those are all good. Did anybody have? Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 No, did you all hear her? That's really fantastic. And I mean, I would, it's interesting because I'm someone that views you as doing those things already and really well. And so just even hearing that you were like, oh, I could use this time for, you know, good things, but I could use them for better things. So that's good. So, okay, so we're going to move on. I just kind of wanted to like recap that. So, to paraphrase Psalm 139, God examine me and know my heart. Test me. See if there's anything bad in me. So, if you go back to that time audit or that fiscal fast, sometimes those allow you to like really examine and go, am I using my time wisely? Are there moments that I haven't been stewarding that time or resource or my health or whatever it is really well? So there's a condition that where excessive setting for a long period of time or lack of physical activity or movement weakens certain muscles. And it causes them to become less responsive and potentially leading to pain and dysfunction. And it's called dead butt syndrome. So it's also known as gluteal amnesia. Both of those, I love both of those names because everything's connected in our body. When this happens, this dysfunction can happen in other places. So it just doesn't remain in that area. So if you have that, all of a sudden you might realize, oh, wait, my back hurts, or now my feet hurt in addition to my back hurts. So it's like it trickle down, trickle up, however you want to look at it. It affects a lot of things. It can affect people who are active, but maybe they aren't activating those muscles. And the good news is it can be prevented and cured, but what you have to do is really do some focused work for about 8 weeks. So once you end up getting this, you have to go, okay, now to undo this, I have to work on this, think like physical therapy, for 8 weeks to get that function back. So perhaps we have an area of stewardship that we need to reactivate or rehabilitate or even stretch. So how can we know if we're stewarding what we've been given well, or even if we're not prayerfully examining them? So if we're not really going in and examining those areas, how do we know if we have gluteal amnesia? Like, you have to really look at those areas to go, am I using my time wisely? Am I using my health wisely? Have things that were meant to be good replace things that are actually better? So how you handle things is a megaphone to others on what you believe to be true about God, what you believe to be true about his love, what you believe to be true about his goodness, what you believe to be true about his promises, what you believe to be true about his justice. So our actions and our reactions really are that big megaphone to the world, even our family, even believers. So even the people that you live with, how you react to things and how you act with things is that megaphone to go, oh, that's what this person believes to be true. It's not just lost people. So when thinking about salvation, we have to think about what we're saved from, what we're saved to, and who we're saved by. So it's a past, present, and future view. So you're probably like, well, what on earth does that really have to do with stewardship? Our stewardship is an expression of discipleship with a heart for God's mission in the world. You think that if somebody is at a swim meet and they're sitting down and they're using like a couple minutes to like write some cards to people, like what would you think if you observed that? You'd be like, well, that's really sweet that person's doing that. Like you could really, that might open up that conversation just to be like, oh, that's so sweet. I always see you reading cards, or I see you doing this, or whatever it is. So you are stewarding your time, but you're ministering to others. And it might just be like in a really quiet way that you don't even know how it's speaking to somebody else. So use what you have and use it often. We don't fully understand this when we're kind of like saved at a young age, but when we're older and we have a paycheck and we can spend our money on whatever we want to spend our money on and do whatever we want to choose, like you have a different reference point. But when you're younger, you're not necessarily going, oh, I might have bad health one day, or, my feet are going to hurt, or, I'm going to experience death over and over and over again and just be pulverized. There's going to be things that you don't realize when you're young that you do when you're older. And so we have to make sure that we're stewarding these things well. So think in terms of a child wanting a bike. You may ask, are you going to use it? Normally what happens when somebody say, you're like, are you going to use it? And then after that newness wears off, you find them using it less and less. And then what happens is they might even start to be a little careless with something. They might even leave it out in the rain or in the driveway. And you remind them where it belongs and tell them, I'm going to get rid of it. Like that's like your threat. And then you do, and the tears start. And then what happens? They're like, but that was my favorite. I loved it. I want it back. This can happen in discipline in our own lives, that we're not using certain things that God has given us. And then all of a sudden, when it's gone, we're like, oh, wait, I love that. That was my favorite. I want it back. And we're not looking at it that way. We're just looking at it like from a perspective of like something that I loved was taken away. But really, were you using it and stewarding it well? So apply that same principle to yourself. Are you stewarding the things you're doing, the things that you've been given? Your time, your money, your cell phone, your car, your house, your yard, whatever it is. Like, are you stewarding all of those things well? In Job 1:21, he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. We don't always get to see why things happen, but we do trust in God's sovereignty. The good and bad things are given to us by a gracious Father, and those gifts can sometimes come from really hard places. And you have to train your brain and your heart to look and refine your wants and your ways and your will to reflect Him and His. And that doesn't come naturally. And so there can be like a real tension from going from the things that you want towards the things that He wants. And it can be like, oh, how am I going to use my time wiser? Or, do I have a social life anymore? And maybe that's something that you actually need to do. Maybe you've been like, it feels safer to have a hermitage because people, like I'm someone that has a super sensitive heart. And I've been going through like a really, really hard family thing. And, you're just like, it is really easy for little infringements to hurt even more. And you're like, oh, I'm just going to go live in my closet because it's like a little safer there. So maybe like you don't have a social life just because you're afraid and you're just trusting in the things that instead of going, he's in control and he has a bigger picture. So one of the things He's given us to steward is our skills or talents, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's turn to 1 Peter 4. We're going to read 10 through 11. So 1 Peter 4, 10 through 11. I'm going to go ahead and read it. Each of you should use whatever gift you've given. Let me start over. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To Him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. So when stewarding our skills or talents, there's 4 things to remember. So your skill and talent comes from God. Now, also, I want you all to kind of plug in the things from the previous week. You can talk about your finances. You could talk about your time. You could talk about, any number of things that you have. So just plug that in right there. So your skill and or X comes from God. He gave you those skills and talents to show off His glory. Your skill and talents are a stewardship given by God and for God. And our skill and talents are for service to others. So again, you can plug in any of the resources that we've talked about right there. So some people are just born with a skill or talent, and it's kind of innate. I'm not a jealous person, but I'm really jealous of people that have that. Most skills require years of focus and training to really excel at them. Regardless of the hours invested in mastering a specific skill, there's a deliberate and intentional practice. And for some circumstances, you have to really develop them. And this can involve others. It can involve others giving you feedback, telling you there's adjustments that need to be made, improvement. There could be determination. All of those muscles are being worked while you are working on this skill. There's a focus, but gluteal amnesia, we can concentrate on the skills muscle so much that others start to atrophy and they get amnesia. They forget how to work. Now, you all, I work with a bunch of CT surgeons, cardiothoracic surgeons, and they have spent decades in school. And what happens is they have spent most of their life in school thinking about themselves or their career. And I don't say themselves like in a bad way, but it's like their focus is their learning and their skills, and which is what you'd want in a CT surgeon. But what happens is then all of a sudden they get out of school, and now all of a sudden they're put in charge of departments, and they've never been in charge of anyone but themselves. And now they also have patients that they have to speak to. And I'm going to tell you that some of those people have personalities like thumbtacks. And so they're not only in charge of departments that have, hundreds of people, they also have hundreds of patients, and they've never really talked to anyone or thought of anything other than my school, this is my focus, this is me. So their people skills don't match their professional skills. They kind of have that dead butt syndrome where they were so focused on this that now it literally will take that equal amount of time for them to develop the people skills that it took them to develop their professional skills. And, some of y'all may have even been in a situation where you've seen a doctor and you're like, that personality was something else. So, but it's interesting when you start thinking about a skill or talent that you may have yourself and say, well, why did I get this? Like, why me? Why do I have this skill? Who gave you the opportunity to get the education? Who gave you the ability and time to hone your craft over the years? Where did you get the desire and motivation and joy in performing the skill in the first place? Who gave you parents or teachers or people that would encourage your talents in unique ways? God's done all of that. He is the source of all good. Psalm 16:2, I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, I have no good apart from you. So when I'm saying those things, all of us come from whatever circumstances that we come from, and it's going to look different. Some of you all may have parents in this room. Some of you all may not have parents in this room. We're all going to come from different places. So you can be like, oh, well, I don't have parents, or I put myself through college, or whatever. Well, who gave you that determination to do it? So you really have to go, whatever it is that got me to where I am, God has placed me in these circumstances and surrounded me with these people to get me where I am with whatever the skill and talent is. So let's walk through 3 important implications of our skills that God's given us. So God delights in your skill. Proverbs 22:29, do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure man. You feel the delight and pride of the author in that verse. Or in Exodus, God grants ability to his people so that the tabernacle might be crafted with skill. I mean, if they put me in charge of the tabernacle, it would blow over like the first windstorm that came through. Think about the skill. Like Chris, the day that the laser pointer didn't work, he was just talking about the tabernacle, and, he's talking about all of the skill that went into that. Isn't it crazy to think all of those people, they didn't have the internet to go look something up? It's not like they had all these college courses and they're like, oh, but look, I got this engineering degree. They didn't have all of those things. So in Exodus 31, it says, and the Lord filled Bezalel with the Spirit of God, with the ability and intelligence, with knowledge and all craftsmanship to devise artistic designs, to work in gold, silver, and bronze, in cutting stones for setting and in carving wood, to work in every craft. And I've given to all able men ability that they make all that I have commanded you. Or in Psalms 33:3, sing to him a new song, play skillfully on the strings. God loves skill, and as we can see from these examples, he uses it to his praise and glory. So why wouldn't he use your skill and talent to his praise and glory? So the second thing, God gets credit for your success. There's a joy that comes from a skill that's well used and that's good and God honoring. But often what we do is we boast about things we just don't have a reason to boast about. And in 1 Corinthians 4:7, it says, if you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive? I cannot read today. I promise I'm literate. If then you received it, why do you boast as if you did not receive it? So we have to make sure that God gets the credit for our success when we're doing something. There was a girl that was in my life for a season, and she had wanted to sing in church. And I was like, okay, then do that. I just thought, I'm going to trust that you can sing, because most people, like that say that, they probably have a general idea that they can sing. And so she says, well, I don't want to do it unless like I can have the solo. And like, it really was, I was like, okay. Because I just thought, I said, but what if God wants you in the choir? Like, why would you not want to do that? And I said, but also, what if that's like, I don't know how this works. There's a reason I don't sing. Bless you, my child. But, you know, I feel like that's something that you would earn in order to have the solo. It's not like all of a sudden you walk in and then you just walk up there and then you start singing. There has to be some steps before that. So we have to make sure that God gets credit for our success. And God delights in that skill. And so the third thing is limits in skill are also from God. This one speaks to me. Limits in skill are also from God. Your lack of skill is also from God. If He's the one who gave, He's also the one who decided to not give. And we can miss that sometimes. So we can just be like, what about me? I can't tell you all how many times I have sat next to Allison in church and people turn around and they're like, you sing so beautifully. And I'm invisible to them. No one's ever said that to me. And she does. Her voice is like a songbird. But it's so funny because it's like people will turn around and compliment her. And I'm like, you're not saying that to me. And, but, it's like that is something that I lack. And so this is true of our capabilities. It's also true of our capacities. What you can do and how much you can do it are limits fixed by God, and those limits are good. You all, I'm a slow reader, and it takes me a little bit longer to learn something than most people. I just am. And so what happens is when I tell somebody that, their knee-jerk reaction is to interpret that I'm saying that I'm stupid or I'm putting myself down. And that's not what I'm doing, because I don't think either of those things are true. I just have a general understanding of my average learning capabilities. But I also have an insane capacity for loving people. So which is more useful? Let me be the slowest reader if that means that I'm able to love people well. So sometimes what we do is we focus on that lack and go, oh gosh, I'm the slowest person. I'm going to be a slow reader. And we can focus on that instead of going, wow, but I have this capacity that's very different than this capability. And so we have to make sure that we're focusing on the right things, but then we have a responsibility and a joy before God to strategically work to expand both our capability and our capacity. And that's how He's designed us. We don't get to be like, oh, well, I'm a potato. No, I mean, you really have to say, okay, I might be a slow reader, and I've told you all this a million times. I'm a terrified public speaker. It's very, very hard and challenging for me. So now I'm doing all of the things that are very, very hard for me to stand up in front of people, to speak in front of people, to, do an intensive study on this, read as much as I possibly can, do all of these things. We have a responsibility to God to work on those capacities and capabilities. And it doesn't matter if we're 20 or if we're 70. We still have that same responsibility. It's not like you reach 70 and you're like, learned it all. I mean, you got to keep going. So we might ask God, why hasn't God given me more of a particular skill, or why don't I have this particular ability like this other person? And that can be really hard because you're so focused on, I feel like I should be doing this now in my life. Like, I feel like I should have children, or I should be married, or I should have grandchildren, or whatever it is. Like, you can have like this constant focus of where you think you're supposed to be. And we have to say, gosh, maybe it's just not my time yet. Maybe God's doing something and refining something in me to get me ready. Julia Child didn't even start cooking until she was 40, and she wrote her first cookbook, well, collaborated on her first cookbook when she was 50. And Amy Carmichael was a missionary in Asia until she was 83. And so for 50 years, she served as a missionary throughout Asia. Do you think that she was the same missionary at 33 and had the same skills and talents that she had at 83? Is there anything that she may have learned or increased in capability and capacity over those 50 years? That I'm certain language was part of them. I'm sure that just learning culture was part of that. So, like, you're changing your capacity and your capabilities, but you're doing it to serve Him in greater ways. So, don't assume that your lack of skill or talent is real just because it hasn't been revealed yet. It can be there, it just hasn't been revealed yet. So Candace York, she has a wicked sense of humor, if you all don't know. She told her children something in an effort to minimize waste, but also to see that there's still value in something, even if it doesn't look perfect. So she told all of her children, so don't go up to them and ruin this, but she told all of her children with much enthusiasm, because tone matters, when they chose a banana and peeled it, that the bruised spots are the sweet spots. And so what she would do is she would nearly congratulate them when they would, reveal that bruise spot. And she would deliver it in a way like, oh my gosh, this is something so special and it's extra. It's something others don't have. You got this really great thing and it's to be celebrated. And so when her children eat a banana now, what they do is they like eagerly look for that bruise spot, and they're like, I got the sweet spot. They look for that. They're not looking at it like, oh, I can't eat this. This is bruised, or this is this is garbage. I need to throw this away. Sometimes our skills are made from and through really hard places, and our bruises can become those sweet spots. But we have to make sure that we're working on that. Again, capability and capacity. Maybe your superpower is encouragement. That might come from a place of discouragement, hurt, or upbringing. And so what you decided to do was you decided to grow in capability and capacity so that others don't feel the way you may have felt or continue to feel. But that's something that you have to really be cognizant of. And that's why, like when you're doing like those time audits or things like that, you're just going, I'm like evaluating this. So you have to say, wow, I have this area I want to work on encouragement, but I don't have a template for that. I wasn't raised in those situations, but I want that myself, and I want others to receive that. And so now I have to work on that. You might find someone even in this room that you're like, they are so good at that. That's something that I want to learn from them. Or, it might mean that you have to write yourself Post-it notes when someone comes up and says, oh, such and such happened. Or, you see, I'm going to call him out, Ron Douglas on a walker. And, you're going to be like, I want to put Kelly on my prayer list because, she's got her hands full with that. So, it's like you can sit there and you can write those little notes and be like, I need to work these muscles because these aren't muscles that have been worked before. So bruise spots can be sweet, but they can also convince us that certain things aren't worth enjoying. So we have to look at a larger picture, and even larger because God has a bigger picture, and God is even bigger than those bruise spots that we have. So how can you all see how this can also be like a bit of a tricky spot though, like a bruise spot? It's a place that's going to require analysis, again, like an audit. And because what you don't want to do is then kind of slowly shift to like it's making you feel good about the things that you're doing in those, acts. You're like, have you all ever had a moment where the Holy Spirit's convicted you, where he's like, and it's so quiet and it's so subtle. It could be like in a tiny conversation. You could be doing a tiny thing and it's like, mm-mm. And you're like, And then do you listen? Those little bruise spots, the areas that you're working on, I really hate the word trigger because I feel like everyone has like really played that out. But we can have like those spots that trigger us in those bruised areas where, we're like, oh, that kind of twinged a bit. And now you can start doing it potentially for your credit. So you've got to make sure that you're really analyzing that. So I am not someone that feels like I have any particular skill or talent, and maybe someone else in here is like that, but I'm mediocre at a lot of things. But that doesn't mean that just because like I'm mediocre at a lot of things, I get a pass. There's things that like I'm decent at, but I had to develop those muscles, and that's muscle memory. I had to ask God for help, and those bruise spots bring me closer to Him, and I realize it isn't in my power or strength. There's no way I could stand up here and do this. Like the torso sweat that happens right before class every week is so much where, and have you all ever had like one of those big adrenaline dumps? It's like by the time class is done, I just feel like I've run like 3 marathons because it's like a constant hour of like high level adrenaline. And so, you have to say, but that doesn't mean I get a pass. Just because it's something that makes me feel uncomfortable, or I don't feel I'm particularly good at, or this is very challenging for me, it's something that you don't get a pass at. You still have to do it. You got to work through it and be like, this isn't in my strength, it's in His. So the physical fast and time audit is something that helps you to think to a conclusion. So when you start doing it, you might go, well, let me think, I don't have a social life, and you're like, oh, wait, but I do. And so those things are helping you think to a conclusion. And it might not be 100% accurate, but it allows you the critical thought process you need to scrutinize how you're stewarding your time and your money on any given week. Then you can see where your will and want and ways reflect you or His. And because there's such a large participation in this class, we're going to have like a lot of different things in here and a lot of different circumstances and things that vie for our minds and our time and our eyes and our ears and everything. But that's why it's important, because there's not like a one size fits all of like the way Irene may spend her time is not the way that Liza's going to currently be spending her time. So that's why you have to take the responsibility to look at it and go, am I stewarding the things in my life well, wherever I am? So you all picked up an index card. So I want you all to think of 3 skills or talents that God's entrusted you with and write those down. So again, think of 3 skills or talents that God's entrusted you with. And, like it could be anything from cooking to singing to being a good listener. So it doesn't have to be, something that's like, I'm an excellent painter. It doesn't have to be, or, I know how to lay brick or whatever it is. It can be, no, but I mean, it's like, right. Okay, now what I want you all to do is write down how you've seen God bring glory to Himself through each of those skills that you wrote down. Write down how you've seen God bring glory to himself through each of the skills that you wrote down, or how he could. So again, this is a think to conclusion practice. So even if you're like, oh gosh, I can't wait, how you could see him bring glory to himself through each of these skills. Okay, now think about how you could use each skill to serve others and then jot those down next to each one. So, whatever the three skills were, think about how you could use each of those skills to serve other people and jot those down next to them. So, you all can see the importance of setting down and going, I have to look at this and analyze it, figure out if I have this that God's given me, and how can God glorify himself through this? And how can I use this to serve others? That's why it's important to sit down and think through this. And the last thing is, what does good stewardship of whatever those skills and talents are look like over this coming summer? So whatever you have on your sheet, how can you do something with those over the summer? What does that look like? I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh, I'm really great at growing plants. I'm not. But it's one thing to say, I'm really great at growing plants. But if you aren't using that incredible skill and talent, and it really is, to have a green thumb with a kingdom focus and intentionality, then who's it for? So if you really think of something that you have and you can't think of like a kingdom focus and how you can intentionally serve others with that, then why are you doing it? What's it for? I mean, we should have things that we enjoy in life, but how can you use that? So, did anyone write down anything that they want to share? Was there something that jumped off your page? Okay, that's. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Right. Right. I mean, that's a great example. Yeah. Right. No, great example. So, did God give you your talents or skills for you to stop using them, for those muscles to atrophy and forget how to work? There are some skills and talents that are going to occur during a certain time in our lives, but they may never be used again in a significant way. My sister was first chair clarinet in middle school and high school. She never picked up a clarinet after high school. She did join the Air Force. She got married. She became a mother of 5 girls. And as Christians, they decided for various reasons that they would homeschool the kids. And if you're in public or private school where she lived, then you could enroll in dual credit courses for college books or for college credit and graduate from high school with an associate's degree and, like your high school diploma on that same day. And your college books would all be covered. Well, where she lived, if you were homeschooled, those college books weren't covered. They were out of pocket. So if you were in private school or public school, you could do dual credit and all your books were covered. But if you're homeschooled, those books aren't covered and they're just strictly out of pocket. And so Kim was like, this doesn't work. And so she was like, she fought for legislative changes for dual educated homeschoolers in Florida and had the law changed. And this went into effect well after her girls were done with school, but Kim's skills and talents were used to benefit others, not herself. And it was wildly inconvenient for her and uncomfortable, and she felt like she was in way over her head. But she was stewarding her current skills. Could you imagine if all she did was she walked up to her congressman and she was like, let me play my clarinet for you? I mean, they would be like, she is bonkers. But instead, what she used is the skills that she had developed after that to say, oh, there's something that I can do now that I wouldn't have been ready for before. This is something that now I'm ready for. And it came with a lot of challenges. Skills change as life changes, but we can use those even when it feels uncomfortable and too hard. So just because you're good at something also doesn't mean you might not have to lay it down for something worthier of our time. So just like what she said at the beginning of class, I'm trading something good for something better. And you have to really analyze that to say, what am I doing? So Peter laid aside his skill of being a fisherman to follow Jesus. I mean, none of us would argue. Of course, that's something better. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you're obligated to commit to doing it. Being a good steward says yes to some options and no to others. And so we have to make sure that when we're looking at those things, we're using our time wisely. We also have to say, sometimes it's like you might have a knee-jerk reaction to be like, I don't want to, so I'm going to come up with an excuse and be like, oh, I can't do that because I've got to get home and I've got to feed my cat, or, whatever it might be. We've got to make sure that, we're being honest in those things. If we really have the time, then we need to utilize that time well. So one of my coworkers is a 45-year-old dad, and I asked if he was doing anything new. First of all, what a weirdo thing to say to somebody. Like, not what did you do last weekend? I was like, hey, Darren, doing anything new? Like, what a weird thing. And so I have no idea why I said. He said, I'm learning to swim. And I was like, I mean, he's 45. And to me, it sounded so odd because my pawpaw's method was, like if you don't want to die, you'll figure it out. And that's how all of us, like, we just spent our whole lives knowing how to swim. It wasn't an option with him. And I survived. And so, everyone, we're a family of people that swim. And so it was so weird for me to go, he is 45 years old. And I couldn't imagine what that was like. And he said, he was the oldest person by decades in his swim class. And I'm like, first of all, that's so cute. But, I was like, well, why now? Because I just was like really confused. Like, why would someone be that age and decide I'm going to figure this out now? And he said, because my kids want to swim. And he said, I can't have them doing something if I can't help them. And I was like, ooh, 45 years old. And he said he was the oldest person in his swim class, but I can't have my kids doing something if I can't help them. You're not too old to learn a skill or develop a talent. You also might need to use your skill or talent to help someone else. And that's discipleship. So how are you using the things that you have in your lives, stewarding all the things that you've been given? I mean, do you need to be 45 and be in a swim class? I mean, like metaphorically. But, perhaps that is something that you have to say, gosh, I can't help someone else if I'm not figuring this out on my own. And that goes back to like doing an analysis of your time. It doesn't have to exactly be this exact one, but if you're not analyzing it, you have to go, well, how do I even know how I'm spending my time if I'm not looking at it? How do I even know how I'm spending my finances if I'm not really looking at it with a critical eye? So going back to 1 Peter 4, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. How do you decide which skills to invest in and which skills to lay aside? In God's kindness, there's often a convergence between what we enjoy and the ways that we can serve. And that sweet spot isn't necessarily easy, but it can be sweet. So presumably you can work as unto the Lord while doing anything, yet it's probably easiest to do that in an area you enjoy. All that taken into account, scripture tells us that enjoyment isn't the main point. The point is service, but we have to use those think to a conclusion exercises to really assess the way we're stewarding the things that are in our lives. So, how can you be a better steward if you don't know what your baseline is today? Not before you were your junior year in college, not before marriage, not before kids, not before you got this job, not before you retired, not before the diagnosis, but today. How do I steward my time today? How do I steward my time this week? How do I steward my money with what I have today? How do I steward my health, whatever it might be, good or bad, sickness and health, today? So you have to constantly, you all are not the same people you were 10 years ago. I mean, you just weren't. You're not the same people you were 20 years ago. You're not the same people you were 30 years ago. So, I mean, why would you feel like you don't have to sit down and go, I really need to analyze, am I looking at this through that kingdom lens of how I'm currently stewarding the things in my life? You know, it's like Lisa had said, you know, she's just busier than she's ever been now that she's retired, but not retired because she's still working, because that's Lisa. But, you know, it's like one of those things that you go, I have to look at where I am now. This is a different season. This is a new season. And go, how am I using the things and stewarding them well? Have I put things that are good, but there's things that could be better, or I could be, you know, spending 5 minutes at a swim meet, you know, utilizing this time because this is where I am right now. But in 3 years, I won't be at a swim meet again in the same way I'm doing it right now. So you have to look at wherever you are. So I pray you steward the things you've been given for his honor and glory. And I really ask that you all do those critical think through, think to a conclusion analysis. So I'm going to leave you with the charge of Peter gives in 1 Peter 4:10. It's each has received a gift. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Gracious God, we understand that you call us to be stewards of your abundance, the caretakers of all you've entrusted to us. Help us to always use your gifts wisely and teach us to share with others generously. May our faithful stewardship bear witness to the love of Christ in our lives. We pray with grateful hearts. In your name I pray. Amen.